Today on Mother Mayhem.
Every single time you reach for understanding instead of punishment, every time you choose curiosity over shame, you, my friend, are doing the work. Welcome back to Mother Mayhem, the podcast for daughters of narcissistic and emotionally limited mothers. I'm your host, Heather Gray. And today, friends, well, I am trying that new intro on for size, seeing how it sounds, how it fits, and how it feels. I know Mother Mayhem has become a haven for daughters of narcissistic mothers, but I also hear from daughters whose mothers caused havoc and trauma in their lives, yet they aren't sure they belong here. I want you to know, if you have been impacted by a mother wound, you belong. Words matter, and I am working hard to get this one right. Thanks for being on this ride with me. And today, I get to introduce all of you to Mary. And Mary, I am so excited to say this. I have named you after one of my all-time favorite TV characters, Mary from Little House on the Prairie. I always loved Mary. And when I tell you I daydreamed about her and I being the very best of friends, I am not really exaggerating there. She had such a strong sense of right and wrong. She always knew who she was. She was fiercely loyal. And then when she became blind, her family did everything they possibly could to support her, to get her the treatment she needed, to learn what she needed most. And Mary, I really wish you had received even an ounce of that kind of care in your own life. You so very much deserved it. Now, on Little House on the Prairie, Mary's family worked really hard to understand her. And we know that in your own life, you had to fight and fight to be understood yourself. You received far less than anything you ever deserved. And I want you to hear that from me clearly today. Now, on Little House on the Prairie, Mary fought through blindness, and we know you aren't fighting through literal blindness, but in your letter, I hear that same sense of loss, of feeling lost, of fearing your next step. And I think you and Little House Mary would truly understand one another. And now, Mary, I think it's time you and I clue everyone in on what you and I already know. That today we're talking about something really sensitive for you. And we want everyone listening to know up front that you're sharing this in the hopes that another daughter out there feels seen and supported if she too shares in your struggle. So just take a deep breath with me here. We're going to go slowly, and I promise you I am working to use as much care as possible. But also, we're not going to hide or shrink from this conversation, because doing so only makes space for shame. And there's no shame in this. I promise you that. But of course, I also know that it doesn't always feel that way. Today, Mary wants to talk to all of you and share how, as a result of being raised by an abusively narcissistic mother, she developed an eating disorder, something she's still struggling with today. Now, last week, I talked about popular culture's love of the phrase trigger warning and why I'm not a fan of it. That hasn't changed very much in the past week, but I do want to acknowledge that this is a conversation that is long overdue, and I know Mary isn't the only one struggling. And I know that if you share in Mary's struggle, even hearing about eating disorders can stir up a lot of dysregulation and nervous system upset. I can't presume to know the best way for each daughter to hear this conversation without feeling that reaction inside of them. But what I can tell you is that I am doing my absolute best to offer you the information you need, the validation you deserve, and most importantly, a path out of this suffering. Now, Mary and we have talked at length about this episode. She knows my plan for the conversation, and she's also included her therapist in the process of sharing her story with all of you. And as I always say, today might not be the right day for you. This might not be the right time. And if that's true, please do listen to yourselves on that. But we also know that eating disorders are really good at getting you to look away, at convincing you that they're not that big of a deal, that you don't need to do anything about them. And we know that your eating disorder doesn't tell you the truth. So while I'll stand by my usual caution of going slow and taking your time and listening to yourselves, I also want to say this part clearly. If you share this struggle with Mary, I really do hope you find your way back here. And when you do, I hope you bring whatever support you might need to help you take in this conversation. Okay, Mary, here's your story, and I'm going to find you on the other side. Hello, Heather. After joining your community and getting to know you more, I wanted to share my story with you, just in case you would like to use it for the podcast at some point in time. If not, that's okay too, because I know my situation is different. Thank you for creating a space that just feels so safe for me. You, the podcast, and the community have been such bright lights for me in this really dark time. My hope is that if I write to you, it will help someone else who's struggling like myself. I'm sure I'm not the only one that has developed coping mechanisms to deal with all of the emotional abuse or feel like they have no control. I'm not quite sure how to start, but I'll do my best to tell this story. There is so much, and condensing it might be difficult, but here goes. Like many other daughters, I grew up in a family that seemed picture perfect on the outside. My family consisted of 2 married parents with stable jobs and 2 children. I was their only daughter, and my brother was 4 years younger than me. We grew up in a small farm town, and my parents built a beautiful house right next door to my grandparents and what used to be a part of their pasture. I know a lot of people would consider this the ideal childhood, but it was not as pretty as it appeared. It turns out that my mother's a covert narcissist. My dad is emotionally limited due to his abusive childhood, and he's an enabler. My brother is the golden child, and I am the scapegoat. My family was very much into fitness and appearance. When I was little, my parents took up bicycling. They told us that we would be bicycling together as a way to spend time together as a family. They even bought 2 tandem bicycles so that we could go ride with them. What started out as fun rides on the trail to get ice cream a couple of times a month became long 20 to 50-mile bike rides several times a week. They were completely obsessed and joined a local bicycling club with a bunch of other adults. I spent a lot of time on the back of the bicycle, bored, ignored, and in my head. My dad raced on the racing team, and he was very concerned about his training. Our lives completely revolved around bicycling and fitness. During the winters when we weren't able to be out bicycling, we spent time at the gym in the evenings after school. My brother and I would either be in the daycare area or bouncing a ball in the gym for hours while our parents worked out. When my brother and I got older, we both discovered we really liked ice skating. I fell in love with figure skating, and my brother wanted to join the hockey team. This was hard to manage around my parents' bicycling schedule, but let us know that they would make the sacrifices to make it work. They were always quick to point out the amount of money, time, and energy they spent on us to make our sports work for them. They'd drop us off at the rink for practice and leave us for hours while they got in their own rides. My figure skating especially always felt like a guilty pleasure and a burden to our family. As the years went on, I began to realize that my mom enjoyed my brother's hockey practices and games far more than my figure skating. She made it very clear that his sport was way more entertaining than mine. She would gladly attend his practices and games. He was always complimented and admired for his athletic ability. She would listen to professional hockey games on the radio with him and take him to hockey games. Meanwhile, my mother would complain about attending my practices. She would criticize me, and she always had something negative to say about my appearance. I never felt good enough. I would work really hard to please her, and if I did please her, then she would act like my best friend, which gave me the drive to keep going. When I was around 13, my body started changing, as it does when we go through puberty. I started to carry a little extra weight, and my parents both would comment on my weight and eating at various times throughout my childhood, but things got a lot worse during this particular time. One day, my mom even had me step on the scale with her so that she could point out that I now weighed more than her. She was delighted in the fact that she weighed less than a 13-year-old. This was the moment when everything changed for me, and I decided that I was going to diet so that I could be thin and earn her approval. I even remember making a list of all the things I was going to work hard to change about myself so that my parents would be proud of me. I'm a natural fixer, and I could fix this. I started my diet during a trip to Disney World. Oh, Mary. And I remember that when I returned back to school, everyone complimented me on my weight loss. It felt so good to be praised. I was determined to keep on this diet, which eventually turned into full-blown anorexia. My mom turned a blind eye to it for as long as possible, but when her friends started showing concern for my rail thin appearance, she finally had to confront reality. I didn't earn her love and acceptance as I had originally thought. I was instead shamed and ridiculed for what she said was my attention-seeking behavior. She told people that I was selfish and I only cared about my appearance. I suffered greatly, not only mentally and emotionally, but I also developed serious health complications which led me to the loss of one of my lungs due to the disorder. I also eventually had to give up figure skating because I kept passing out at practice. My mother had very little empathy for my situation and often played the victim to anyone who would listen to her. I spent most of my teenage years comforting her and trying to be a better daughter rather than focusing on my own recovery. I struggled with my eating disorder most of my teenage years and into early adulthood. Eventually, during college, I was able to move out of my parents' house. They were still a big part of my life, and things only got worse. I met and married my first husband, who turned out to also be a narcissist as well. Within the first 6 weeks of marriage, I found out that I was expecting my first child. I was so excited and overjoyed to be a mom. I vowed after discovering my pregnancy that I was going to be the healthiest version of myself for this precious child. I gave up my eating disorder cold turkey right then and there. When my first daughter was born, nothing could have prepared me for the immense amount of love I felt for her. She gave me the strength to stand up to my narcissistic husband and divorce him. He was emotionally, verbally, and starting to get physically abusive. I also learned later he was cheating on me. My parents did take me in and help me get financially away from him, which I'm grateful for, but that also meant more invalidation from them and my mom constantly undermining my parenting. Eventually, I was able to take over my own finances after passing my nursing boards and taking a job at the hospital. When my daughter was 6 months old, I met and later married my current husband. We now have been married for almost 12 years, and he is one of the best things that ever happened to me. He treats me so well, and he's loved my daughter like his own from the moment he met her. They have this incredibly special bond. We moved into his house, and we've worked hard to create a financially stable home. After marriage, we decided to grow our family and buy a bigger home. We agreed that 3 children would be about right for us, and we added 2 more children to our family. Our second was a boy, and our third was another girl. During this time, I was still able to keep my eating disorder under control. I was loving being a mom to my children, and my husband was wonderful. My mom was still undermining my parenting, but I still felt in control of my life for the most part when she wasn't around. We added 3 more surprise daughters to our family. We didn't plan on having such a large family, but we were overjoyed to have these girls. During this time, my mom's favorite topic of conversation was to ask when my husband was getting a vasectomy. This was the topic at every family gathering and holiday. It was just downright annoying and caused me so much stress. It felt like it should be a private decision that only my husband and I should make together. My mom just couldn't understand why we would want 3 more children. She became so cold and distant with me after each new baby. When I was pregnant with my 6th, I felt like I could barely talk about the baby in her presence. She just wasn't happy for us at all. My eating disorder started creeping back up again, and I struggled to gain enough weight during the pregnancy. After our 6th baby, with the 5th having already arrived, I spiraled into depression, and my anxiety was at an all-time high. Our baby had some complications with her bowels, and she even had to be hospitalized. She wasn't sleeping very well, and she nursed all the time. My eating disorder was out of control. My mom was staying distant and would only help on her own very rigid terms. She only wanted to help me by taking home my brand new baby with her, even though she knows I exclusively breastfeed my children, and that caused me more anxiety. I was also having problems with my brother and his wife that I later learned were created by my mom and that she had been playing both sides. My mother was again bringing up the vasectomy over and over again at family functions, even though she knew my husband had already made the appointment. I was having mixed emotions about the procedure. I knew my husband and I were both done having children, but I also felt like my mom was somehow winning by going through with it. I know that sounds crazy. No, not really, Mary, but it felt like I was giving her the last bit of control I had left. My husband had the procedure done, and I had a mental breakdown the weekend after. I just shut completely down. My husband lovingly suggested therapy and even offered to go with me. I needed help, and I felt like I was spiraling out of control. It didn't take long for the therapist to uncover what was really going on. I told him right away that I was the problem, that I had caused everyone problems my whole entire life. Just ask my mom. He told me to look up covert narcissism and suggested no contact. I have been no contact for 6 months now, and I am working very hard to repair my nervous system. I lost my mom, my father, my brother, my sister-in-law, and my 5-year-old nephew. That is the one that hits the hardest. My brother had a very different childhood than I did, and he doesn't believe me. No contact has also been very hard on my children who had a relationship with my parents. We've all gone to therapy. I'm still struggling with my eating disorder, but it doesn't take up as much space as it used to since going no contact. I don't want to struggle with it anymore, but I'm also afraid to let it go completely. It's hard when you've spent your whole life feeling so out of control to lose the one thing that helps you feel in control. So, here are my questions for you, Heather. I know you told me that I need to allow myself to feel my feelings in order to move past the eating disorder, but how do I do that? I find myself stopping my feelings all the time and shoving them down. Is it ever going to go away, or will I be like this forever? How do I help my kids understand that my eating disorder isn't normal and protect them from developing one too? If there are any other insights you would like to share with me, I would love to hear them. I really want to get better. This is just a small piece of my story, and I could go on for days telling you of all the trauma that I experienced as a child. I just hope that I can provide a better childhood for my kids and break the abuse cycle. If you need to edit this in any way, feel free to do so. I'm not the best at writing, and I overthink things a lot. Thank you again for all that you do. Okay. Well, Mary, I have to disagree with you. I didn't take anything out. That was your whole story. And I want you to know that I think you're very good at writing. And I feel so much of what you share here. And I promise you, if another daughter listening is in your same struggle and she only hears your letter and doesn't even choose to listen to a single word I say next, just hearing your story and being able to say, me too, will be life changing for another daughter. I know this because eating disorders are so rarely talked about. More people are talking about trauma these days, and depression and anxiety, we know, are always given far more airtime and a seat at the table a little bit more comfortably, but eating disorders are not often shared, validated, or normalized, and I'm really hoping that we get to change that here today. While I work to have this conversation with you, Mary, I think it's really important that we clue the audience into the fact that you and I had a couple of different email conversations about your letter after you had first sent it to me. And it's important because one of the things that I learned in your letters and exchanges to me after you shared your story is that you did traditional eating disorder treatment as a teenager. And in that treatment, your mom undermined your treatment every single step of the way. There was no possible way that what you did and what you worked through with clinicians and the team had any prayer of success because your mom undermined it by mocking you, invalidating you, making it about her the entire time. And I had wanted to get a little bit of your treatment history to know what you had already tried so that I would be sure that I wasn't offering you more of the same. I also want to say, as I organize this conversation for you, that while some of you are used to me repeating myself quite a bit on the show and digging home the point because I'm so worried about being misunderstood, this isn't that this time. You are going to hear me repeat myself quite a bit in this episode, and it is going to be about things about listening to your body, paying attention to your breath, and cluing in and connecting to your feelings. The reason why I'm doing this with you is because it's deliberate. You're a mom with 6 kids. You don't have a heck of a lot of time. I can't give you some gigunda treatment plan with 50 million steps that you're going to be able to follow with any kind of realistic expectation. And if we're going to spend time together today, I want to set our time up for success, which is why I'm going to be repeating myself for each of your different questions so that you can see that no matter where you're putting your lens, no matter what area you're looking at, as you have this conversation with yourself, the answers are the same. You're not going to have to grab a whole new bag of tricks. You're not going to have to go and do 50 million new things. It's all going to come back to connecting you to yourself. First, want to offer some quick psychobabble, for lack of a better word, for all of the daughters listening in about eating disorders and their link to childhood trauma. And Mary, you and I know this isn't your first rodeo. You already understand your own experience pretty deeply, and the lines between your parents' physical activity and focus on their own bodies and then on your bodies create that strong correlation between how their behavior, their words, their actions, and their modeling so deeply and clearly impacted you. And also for you and the other daughters, I want to name what's happening in a way that can make sense for you and helps you all feel less alone in it. Now, in your case, Mary, we see that strong and immediate cause and effect. But for others, eating disorders don't really ever come out of nowhere. They're not really about food or weight or even control for some people sometimes, not at their core. They're coping mechanisms. They become these brilliant, in a way, survival strategies that your nervous systems have come up with to help you when you were younger, to help you deal with something that felt unbearable at the time. And for daughters of narcissistic or emotionally limited moms, that something unbearable is often that deep, deep unmet need for safety, attunement, and unconditional love. If your mom was unpredictable, critical, dismissive, or even cruel, your nervous system ended up staying on high alert. And then, as you experienced too, Mary, and a lot of daughters, you were praised for how you looked, but then you got ignored when you were struggling. And your emotions may have been implied to be too much for her. So then that's how you learned to swallow them down. Or maybe food became for some of you the one reliable comfort or the one thing you could control when everything else felt so out of control. However it started, the eating disorder stepped in as your protector. It gave you a way to numb your pain, to avoid rejection, and to create a sense of order in a world that really started to feel chaotic. And then it got stuck because, like all coping mechanisms that help you all survive childhood, an eating disorder doesn't go away when you grow up. It stays even when you no longer need it in that same way. And, and this is super frustrating, it often intensifies in those moments when you're feeling vulnerable. Just like when y'all set boundaries or you let yourselves be seen or you try to step into healthier versions of yourselves. So when you say, Mary, in your letter that you feel shame about falling back into it, I want to push back gently on that thought just a little bit because this isn't about failing and it's not about willpower and it's not about strength. This is a really old part of you, a part that learned how to survive in a really unsafe world. And all it's doing right now is trying to step in and help you again. But what I hear in your words, Mary, is that this time you see it. And that right there is a huge, profound shift because when you see it, when you can name what's happening, you are then able to create space to do something different. And before we even get into what healing might look like, we have to sit with how incredibly not okay what happened to you was, because your first attempt at treatment wasn't just unsuccessful, it was hijacked, and not by accident, not by circumstance, but by the person whose love and support should have been a given. Your mom didn't just fail to show up for you, she actively made things worse. She knew what you were struggling with, and instead of protecting your healing, she dug into your shame and she made it so it had nowhere to go but deeper. That's how that happened for you, Mary. And that reality, it isn't just painful, it's dangerous because shame doesn't ever lead to healing. It leads to hiding. It leads to doubling down on those survival strategies, no matter how unhealthy they are for you now. It creates this desire and tendency to cling even harder to whatever it is has helped you get through things in the past. And in your case, well, we know that happened to be your eating disorder. So, of course, treatment didn't work. It couldn't have worked for you because real treatment requires safety and it requires trust. And how could you trust when the very person who was supposed to be your safety was the one holding the match to your pain? And Mary, in this conversation, I have to be super clear and super honest with you that there's another painful truth in this story here for me. The people in charge of your care, well, I really think they should have caught this. They should have seen what was happening, and they should have known that mother's undermining treatment is textbook in cases like this. But they didn't. Maybe they ignored it. Maybe they didn't have the training. Maybe they were too focused on the symptoms to see the cause. But either way, Mary, they left you alone in something that should have never been yours to manage on your own. And what did that end up teaching you? Well, of course, it taught you that the only person you can ever rely on is you, that the system isn't safe, that trusting others isn't safe, that the only thing you can ever count on is this. And we have to be honest, that belief, as much as we don't like it, not entirely irrational, because at the time it was true. So when you say it's scary to let go of this, that makes absolute sense to me because your eating disorder has been the thing that has never left you, never let you down, never abandoned you the way people have. It's been your armor, your coping strategy, your protection. And no, it is definitely not serving you anymore. It is making things harder for you, but we know it has worked. And that has been enough to at least keep you here with us. And that is what makes healing so hard. Not just stopping the behavior, but untangling the deep nervous system level belief that if you let go, you will be unprotected. So here's what I really need you to hear. The treatment you had then is not the treatment you have now. And the person you were then is not the person you are now. You see things you couldn't have seen before. You're naming things that weren't named before. And really importantly here, you're not alone in this anymore. you have an entire care team behind you. You have your husband, you have Mayhem daughters. And Mary, hear this with me. You have yourself. You might not like all the choices you make and the things you think and feel sometimes, but it is so clear that you have had you this entire time. And while I wish that didn't have to be true, and while I really believe you deserve so much more, having your own back is still something that gets to be yours. Now, Mary, I'm going to start with the questions you had because they so clearly show us that your wise mind is already on the scene. It knows your eating disorder is something you can let go of now, but they're feeling a little bit lost as to where to start. So we're going to start with your first question, and it's a little bit of a biggie. Here goes. How do I actually allow myself to feel my feelings? And yep, not your first rodeo on this. And I know we've had some private conversations about it, but I know you know that your feelings need to be felt in order to move through them. But knowing something and being able to do that end up oftentimes being two different things. And this is going to be especially true for you when you have spent your lifetime learning how to shove feelings down because it wasn't safe for them to come to the top. So, of course, your brain is going to default to pushing them down. That isn't failure per se, that's habit. And the good news here is that habits can be rewired. One of the biggest myths about feeling your feelings is that you have to sit down and invite them all in all at once, as if you're opening the floodgates. And that sounds terrifying, especially when your bodies learn that emotions are overwhelming and dangerous. But feeling your feelings doesn't mean drowning in them. It can start really small, like noticing when you're about to shove something down and just pausing for a second, maybe putting a hand on your chest or your stomach and just acknowledging that something's there. That's it. No deep dive required. Just noticing is the first step. Another way in might be to get curious. Instead of shoving it down, what happens if you ask yourself, what is this feeling? Where do I feel it in my body? What is it trying to tell me? You don't have to fix it. You don't have to analyze it to death. You just have to acknowledge it. And if sitting in your feelings feels too overwhelming, you can move with them instead. Walking, stretching, scribbling in a journal. Sometimes feelings need a physical outlet before they can even start making sense in your own mind. If the emotion feels stuck, movement can somehow help to unstick it. And here's something else that might be important. Sometimes the feeling you're avoiding isn't sadness or fear. Sometimes it's anger, and anger can be a really tricky one, especially if you grew up in a home where anger was either unsafe or completely dismissed. If that's part of your story, it makes sense that anger feels like something to avoid. But anger has a job. It shows up to tell you when something is not okay. And if you have spent a lifetime ignoring that, it makes sense that it's showing up in other ways, like through control or through your body. So if anger is a part of what you're shoving down, maybe you let yourself acknowledge that too. Not in a destructive way, but in a safe way. Maybe you write an unsent letter to your mother, or you punch a pillow or scream into your car when no one's around. Maybe you let yourself say, yeah, I am mad. And that makes sense. Because every feeling you push down, it doesn't go away. It just finds another way to make itself known. And what if instead of shoving it down, you just let it be there for a moment? What if you could trust that no feeling will last forever, that no feeling will break you? Because they won't. They're just feelings, and you can handle them. Mary, you also asked me, is it ever going to go away? Or will I be like this forever? And here's what I want you to know, and I hope you can hold on to this with the trust that you have placed in me until you feel ready to believe in it enough yourself. I hear the exhaustion in this question, and the fear, and the hope. Recovery is not a life sentence of struggling. Will you ever forget this part of your life? No. Will you ever go back to a time when food, control, and coping didn't get all tangled up together? No. But will you always feel the way you feel right now? Absolutely not. I know it feels like this will never change, like it's been with you for so long that you can't imagine yourself without it. But just because something's been a part of your life for a long time doesn't mean it has to be a part of your future. Your brain's been wired for survival at this point, not for peace and not for ease and not for joy. Survival. And your eating disorder didn't come out of nowhere. It wasn't random, it was adaptive. It helped you cope when you had nothing else, and it gave you a sense of control when you felt like everything around you was completely unsafe, and it worked until it didn't. But healing isn't just about ripping it away and leaving you with nothing. That would be cruel, not healing. So instead, what we have to help you do is build something new, a different way to cope, a different way for you to care for yourself, and a different way that you can start to feel safe in your own body. And that takes time, and it takes trust. It takes a willingness to sit in this in between time, this space where you're not where you were, but you're also not quite where you'd like to be. And that in between, God, Mary, it's the hardest place to be, honestly. Because at least with the eating disorder, you knew what to expect. You knew the rules, even if they were harsh. You knew the cycle, even if it hurt you. The in between time is uncertain, it's messy. It asks you to sit right down in the discomfort instead of controlling it. And here's the thing, Mary. Fun fact, spoiler alert here, my friend. You are already doing it. I know you don't always feel like you are. I know you have moments when it feels like you're failing, like you're stuck. But every single time you reach for understanding instead of punishment, every time you choose curiosity over shame, you, my friend, are doing the work. Is this going to be with you forever? No, not in the way that it has been. But will there be moments, even down the road, when it whispers back at you? Maybe. That's how the brain works sometimes, even though we wish it weren't true. It remembers those old coping strategies, especially under stress and duress. But one day you won't need it in the way that you used to. You're going to recognize the whisper, and instead of letting it pull you back in, you'll be able to say, I see you, I know why you're here, and I know I don't have to listen to you anymore. Healing isn't going to be about erasing your past. It's about shifting your relationship to it. One day, this thing that feels like it controls you will be something you have control over. It's not going to consume your thoughts. It won't feel like a battle. The urges might still whisper at you, but they're not going to scream. And when they do show up, you'll know exactly what they mean and what to do with them, because you will have built that new coping strategy, that new vehicle for responding to stress, and you won't need your eating disorder in the same way that you have over time. Okay, next up. How do I help my kids understand that my eating disorder isn't normal and protect them from developing one too? First, let me just say this. The fact that you're even asking this question, that you're aware of the impact, means you're already breaking the cycle. You're not passing this down unconsciously, and that awareness alone is really powerful. But I also know that awareness and insight comes with a heavy weight. That fear of saying the wrong thing or doing the wrong thing, of unintentionally shaping the way your kids see themselves or their bodies. The good news here is that preventing disordered eating in children isn't about being perfect, because we know, hopefully, you know, with 6 kids, that that's impossible. It's about creating an environment where food and bodies and emotions are approached with curiosity instead of shame. The good news here is that it's also really simple. What kids need to see and hear is age-appropriate honesty. Kids aren't going to need a deep dive into your trauma, but they do need to know that emotions are safe, that their emotions are safe, that food isn't a moral issue, and that their bodies are inherently good, no matter what. If they notice your struggle, it's okay to say, "This is something I'm working on." That simple statement teaches them that challenges can be faced instead of hidden. And the good news here is that we're all just grown up kids, and we would all benefit from this same kind of understanding around food. For example, neutrality around food. All of us could benefit from being a little bit more neutral around food. Instead of labeling foods as good or bad, we're going to work on framing them as having different purposes. Some foods give us quick energy. Some help us feel fuller for longer. Some nourish our bodies in deeper ways. When kids see foods as part of having a full life, they're less likely to develop rigid or fear-based beliefs around eating. And again, good for us grown-ups too, body respect over body judgment. Even if you're not saying anything negative about their bodies, they're listening to how you talk about your own, and they're listening to how other people talk about their bodies. So instead of saying, "I feel so gross today," or "I need to burn off a meal," you're going to model, and we're all going to model self compassion. I'm learning how to be kinder to myself. My body deserves care no matter how I feel about it today. And if they hear you correcting your own narrative, or you start to correct the narratives that you hear or see on TV, like when it pops up in a TV show or you hear somebody talking about it at a grocery store, you're just going to correct them and say, "Oh, I wish that person knew that food isn't good or bad. It's just food." You can recognize that your voice isn't going to be the only voice they hear. Your messaging isn't going to be the only messaging they get. And anytime there's a conversation that they find themselves in the presence of, you can use it to create and build out that teachable moment. And you're going to work with them on the very thing that you're working with yourself on. That emotions are just signals, they're not threats. A lot of eating disorders are rooted in avoidance. You're trying to push down discomfort, you're trying to move away from fear or sadness. So, helping your kids name their feelings and tolerate them rather than trying to fix them, suppress them, or numb them is going to be one of the most protective factors they have against disordered eating. And you are going to get to learn for yourself while you are helping them do it for themselves. You're going to learn how to say things out loud because it's going to be true for you to them. And you will work on helping it be true for you that it's okay to feel sad. And then you're going to offer them comfort, or you're going to offer them some space. And you're going to use that as a reminder for yourself that you deserve comfort, or that sometimes you need to just walk away and take some space. When kids learn that their feelings are safe, they're not going to have to look for food to control or to look towards their bodies for a sense of control. Then this is the hard part, because kids are smart and they watch and they scan. And you daughters know this more than anything, that if you were to ever see them mirror your struggles or start to reflect back your struggles, if you ever notice your child is engaging in any kind of rigid food behaviors or a body fixation, or you hear them using negative self-talk, the most important thing here is to not panic. We just need you to pay attention. And I really like open-ended questions, curiosity questions. "Hey, I noticed you seemed upset about your body today. Do you want to talk about it?" Or, "I heard you say that you feel guilty for eating that. Where did that idea come from?" Instead of shutting the conversation down or just pushing it away with reassurance, "No, no, 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 you're not fat. You're beautiful." You want to help them challenge the belief about it. Bodies change. That's normal. What else makes you you? teaching them in your words and your example and in your conversations and in your teachable moments that their worth isn't in their appearance becomes an ongoing process, an ongoing conversation, not just a one-time talk that you have one time. And we know that you're still struggling, and that's okay. This isn't going to be about being fully healed before you can protect your kids. It's about modeling for them what healing actually looks like. If they see you working on unlearning these harmful beliefs, of practicing self compassion, repairing your negative self talk when necessary, they're going to learn that perfection isn't the goal, that growth is. And at the end of the day, kids do not need parents who never struggle. They need parents who show up, who reflect, who tell the truth, who talk about it, and who try. And Mary, you were already doing that. And now, okay, I think now I need the deep breath. I have to be honest with you. Your last question, as low key as it kind of sounded, is actually the one that I have spent the most time considering. Because here's my story. You already have been at this recovery thing for a while. So, just about anything I say as to what I want you to know or what direction you can take is probably already something that you've already been told or considered. And sometimes it does take us hearing an old thing in a new way to be able to find understanding and create change. So here goes. You asked me to share any insights because you'd really like to get better. And Mary, gosh, I really want that for you too. First, you and I need to have a chat with your nervous system about what we are about to embark on so that it doesn't freak out on you. Right now, your nervous system is operating based on what it has learned, what has kept you safe, what's helped you cope, what has felt orderly and predictable for you. And even though you want to get better, recovery is asking your nervous system to step into the unknown. And the unknown, well, that feels like danger, even when it isn't dangerous. If you've ever felt like a part of you isn't quite on board with healing, while another part of you is clinging to old patterns, that's probably why. It's not because you're resistant or incapable. It's because your body's learned to survive in this way, and survival patterns don't just disappear when you decide that you don't need them anymore. But here's the good news. Your nervous system can learn something new. It can learn that safety doesn't have to come from control, that nourishment doesn't have to be earned, that your body's not the enemy. And we don't do that by shaming it or forcing it to change. We do it by showing it over and over again that there is another way. So, how do we do that? How do we assure your nervous system that you are safe while you try to move toward healing? And here are a few things we're going to start with, and this is where you can get used to hearing me say them on repeat. We want to work with you, Mary, on helping yourself ground through your senses. When your nervous system feels threatened, when urges hit, when fear rises, we want to help you anchor yourself in the present. Maybe you pick one or two senses and you focus on them. That might look like running cold water over your hands, naming 5 things you can see in the room, holding on to something that has some texture, describing how it feels, reminding your body that you were here and that you were in the now and that you're safe. You can also use your breathing to signal that sign of safety. Good, deep breaths are like a bat signal to your, I'm dating myself with that reference, but are like a bat signal to your nervous system that you've got this. Your breath is one of the fastest ways you can shift your nervous system from survival mode to calm. So Try this one. Breathe in through your nose for a count of 4. Hold that for a count of 4. And then breathe out slowly through your mouth for a count of 6. It's the extended exhale that tells your brain we are not in danger. And then you do that for 5 to 10 times as a way of calming your body and signaling to your body that you are not in danger. You might still be feeling distress, but you're not in danger and the threat isn't imminent. Then we really want to help you in these moments orient, and that's such a psychobabble word, but orient to your space, to know where you are in time and space. Trauma and stress, when they really ignite, they pull you inward. They pull you into your thoughts, into your fears. And a way to counteract that is to gently turn your head and look around the room. Notice the colors, the light, the movement. Let your body see, believe, and notice that nothing is chasing you. And here's another good tip. You can learn to use safe touch. Your nervous system responds to physical reassurance. So you might place a hand on your chest, like I was saying earlier, and one on your stomach, like when you're doing the feelings work, and you're starting to feel your breath. Or you're going to try gently tapping your arms or your legs like a butterfly hug. Or perhaps you try wrapping yourself up in a small blanket or a piece of clothing, a really comfy sweatshirt. These are small things that tell your body you are held, you are here, you are okay. Then, if you just heard me do it in that way, the next thing I'm about to say makes a little bit of sense here. We want to talk to your nervous system like it's a child. Your nervous system isn't the enemy. It is just scared. So instead of fighting it, we're going to talk to it as we would a child who's afraid. I see that you're really scared right now. It's okay. I promise we're safe. I know this is new, but we're going to do this together. We don't have to rush. We're just learning. This kind of self-talk builds that inner safety over time. Healing is never going to happen by forcing yourself forward while your nervous system is screaming for help and trying to hold you back. It helps to bring your nervous system with you by reassuring it, tending to it, nurturing it, and by showing it that the life you want isn't dangerous. And I do want to share, a little bit of a clinical frame and an approach with you, Mary. But before I do that, I want to also let everyone listening in on what you and I already know. After getting Mary's letter, like you heard me say earlier, I did follow up with her to make sure that she had clinical support around any of the interventions that we were going to talk about. And when we were exploring that with one another, she told me that she's already working with a trauma-informed therapist. She's attending a weekly support group for children of dysfunctional families, and she's been learning to manage her anxiety with a combination of medication and those grounding techniques, which clearly I am also a fan of. So while she's not in therapy specifically for an eating disorder, she is eating consistently, she's maintaining some stability, but she wants to work on reducing the shame and the guilt she has around feelings of fullness. And she and her therapist have explored the role of invalidation in her childhood and how that contributed to her relationship with food, as well as her struggles with self-trust and receiving compliments. And she also recognized for me that dissociation and a need for control do tend to play a role in her eating patterns. Right now, she's been using distraction to cope with triggers, but she's also open to the possibility of adding in EMDR therapy in the future. So, Mary, first, we are just going to respect, recognize, and honor the work you have already done in your healing. You are deeply engaged in trauma work. You have insight into your patterns and you're actively managing your anxiety. That isn't any small thing. You have built a strong foundation for yourself, and that speaks volumes about your commitment to your own well being. What you're describing here makes so much sense to me. You're not in crisis with your eating. You have found ways of maintaining consistency, but that shame and guilt around food are still weighing on you. And that is incredibly frustrating to be doing the work and still feel stuck in that feeling part. So it's really important. Again, you've heard me say this, and this is where I'm repeating myself deliberately to remind you this isn't about willpower. It's not about not trying hard enough. These feelings are deeply tied to how you learn to survive. They are not going to disappear overnight. You're already holding so very much between your personal healing, your family, all the responsibilities that come with being a mom to 6 kids. It is understandable that whatever comes next needs to work with your life and it can't add more pressure. You don't need another overwhelming to-do list on your plate. You need small but meaningful shifts that are going to help you have more ease in your body and in your mind. It also makes a lot of sense to me that dissociation has played a role in all of this. When control was taken from you as a kid, food became the one place where you could create that sense of order. And also, P.S. How do you disconnect as a kid from a 50 fucking mile bike ride if to not check out a time or two? That strategy, it wasn't, Mary, about vanity or discipline. It was about survival. And now, as you work to untangle all of those old patterns for yourself, it's completely valid to feel protective of the ways that you learn to cope. You deserve to move at a pace here that feels safe for you. And the fact that you're grounding yourself, that you're staying connected to support, and you're even considering EMDR speaks so much to the intention that you're bringing into this process. It's not going to be about starting from scratch. It is about fine tuning what is going to help you feel more in control of your healing without feeling like you have to do all this work to fix yourself. And what stands out the most to me here is that you already have tools and insight. You're not lost. You're just looking for that next right step. And that step, Mary, has to honor the progress you've made, the life you're balancing, and the deep work you've already done. So now that we have a clearer picture of where you are in your healing, the next step is finding what will help you move forward in a way that feels supportive without being overwhelming. You have already built such a strong foundation. It's not going to be about starting over, but about fine tuning the approaches that fit into your life now and give you more relief from the distress that's still showing up. So here's some possible directions you can explore. And when I offer you directions, I hope what you hear is that I am offering you choice. This is not a series of things that you have to do each step on the list. This is a series of choices that offer you a path that you can connect the various stepping stones to find a path to build your own way out. One that you have buy-in into, one that feels true to you, and one that feels safe for your nervous system. First, I thought we could have a conversation that will help you ease your emotional distress that you experience around food. We know that shame and guilt are part of your biggest struggle. So we want to help you focus on emotional processing, getting more okay with your feelings, and on self compassion. That's going to be way more helpful for you, I believe, than forcing down rigid behavioral changes. And as I thought this through, I thought of a couple of different approaches that you might be able to explore with your therapist. Again, to do this as like a series of stepping stones to say, well, maybe we can try this part and maybe we can try this without creating this. Mary, you have to do it this way on this strict line under these strict parameters. I think if we give you some choice and autonomy around it, this will start to feel easier for you. One of my favorite go to ways of doing this, especially when shame is involved, is something in the psychobabble world that is starting to be called parts work. And this is an approach that helps you understand all of the different parts of yourself, and it helps you hold polar opposite or conflicting feelings. For example, there might be that part of you that feels deep shame around feeling full, while there's this other part of you that knows that you need nourishment. So instead of pushing these feelings and the tension that the opposite feelings create for you aside, parts work is going to help you build self compassion and more harmony by giving each part of you the validation and care that it needs. You can also look at something called dialectical behavioral therapy, or DBT. Now, I'm not saying that you run off to a new therapist who does DBT. What I'm saying is that dialectical behavioral therapy offers a good set of skills that you and your therapist can use together, because those skills taught inside that paradigm offer you tools and skills for managing distress, for emotion regulation, and for self compassion. It helps you with things like radical acceptance or helping you manage those polar opposite feelings. And it also encourages mindfulness in moments when you might be experiencing shame. DBT skills have this magical way of shifting the way you experience your emotions in general, and can be particularly helpful in situations where you're managing them around food, because DBT doesn't get as connected to process or story or narrative. So you don't have to untangle or detach yourself from all of those things. When I was doing more eating disorder treatment than I am now, the main way I treated it and talked with people around it was through the use of DBT skills. The other thing that I latch on to for you here, Mary, is somatic techniques. Because you've talked about already using grounding, already having that in your wheelhouse, so to speak, I think it would be a really good way to expand the way you think about therapy if you include your body in that therapy, especially because eating disorders have this way of dismantling your perception of your body, disconnecting you from your body, or abusing your body. So, somatic techniques are going to help you with those body based regulation skills. You can work with yourself to feel safer. You can try to start beginning to feel more present in your body. And somatic, if you were to Google this, and I did, trying to help you all define it without turning this into a 2-hour marathon episode. I know we're already running over an hour, but somatic work can include grounding exercises. It can include breath work. It can include movement practices, things that reduce your stress response and that can support your emotional processing without needing to rely on those food related coping mechanisms. Now, these are just possibilities. And again, a reminder and encouragement, you don't have to use all of them. The next right step is going to be the one that feels most aligned and most true to you right now. And if any of these approaches resonate, you then get to explore them further with your therapist and make a plan for what might work best. We also, in addition to managing your emotions and regulating your emotions, we want to help you think about ways of building more safety in your body. Because if dissociation is playing a role in your eating patterns, then we want to gently strengthen your connection to your body and help yourself be more of a friend to it, helping you build your sense of your body using somatic approaches. And these are going to help you listen to your body's cues, and then you're going to respond to your body with care instead of avoiding it or trying to control it. One of the somatic approaches in this case might be something like a body scan or gentle movement or those grounding exercises that you've already started to use that can help you feel more present and connected in a way that feels safe. You might also explore or talk about or see if you have any resonance with what's called polyvagal techniques. And I know I'm getting super psychobabbly here. And honestly, Mary, I try not to, but I'm trusting and leaning on the idea that you're doing this with your therapist. I wanted to give you as many options and things to think about as possible. When I say a polyvagal based technique, what I'm talking about is polyvagal theory. And these are strategies that help you regulate your nervous system, that get you out of survival states, out of fight, flight, freeze, and more grounded and more calm. So, again, you're going to be calling on breath work. Polyvagal theory also introduces you to the idea in ways that you can use humming to calm yourself down. That's also where I got the cold water over your hands idea. That's a polyvagal thing. Polyvagal work can include cold water exposure. And then there's also this super brainy, and honestly, this one goes above my pay grade, Mary. I don't know too much about it, so I'm not going to explain it here on the podcast because I don't want to make a mistake in my explanation. But when I was learning about the use of polyvagal techniques for eating disorder treatment, one of the things that came up in my research and discussion on this is something called vagus nerve stimulation exercises. I would encourage you and your therapist to explore that one together. And anyone listening, again, I'm giving you these options and they're all psychobabbly, and I don't want them to be intimidating. And I almost didn't bring them up because I don't want you to get intimidated and scared and run away from them. I want you to be curious, to explore, and to see what might work for you. As we're helping you be your body's best friend, we need to bring in breath work into this conversation. Intentional breathing exercises or an intentional breathing practice, if you will, is going to help you reconnect to your body, is going to help you regulate your emotions. You're going to learn how to breathe from your diaphragm, or you can do that box breathing, which is breathing in for a count of 4, holding for 4, releasing for 4, waiting for 4, and then doing it again. Again, one of the things I learned specifically for this podcast when I was learning about this is that a longer exhale. So when you're exhaling, if you exhale for longer than you inhale, that is a way that you can cue your nervous system that you are indeed safe. Practicing different breathing exercises, developing different breathing practices to manage those moments when your feelings feel really intense, when you're threatened with overwhelm, I think would be a really good idea for you to try. And you can always do it as trial and error. Try something, see how it works. I usually encourage people to try something new 3 to 5 times before they rule it out, because oftentimes your nervous systems go cuckoo and trauma brain gets set on fire because you're changing something and you're trying something new and it doesn't know what's going to happen next. So sometimes it's hard to tell when a new technique is actually working because your trauma brain wants to interrupt it. But try it for 3 to 5 times. See if you feel comfortable with it. See if you get buy-in into it. And then you can start to build these small, consistent practices that are going to help you rebuild or build for the first time a sense of safety and trust in your body. And I know that you and your therapist can explore together what might work best for you. And I hope you're really hearing me when I'm saying this. I'm working with you on the small but powerful shifts you can make. You have so much in front of you. The best interventions are going to be the ones that fit into your life seamlessly, rather than adding one more appointment to go to, one more thing to do, or one more thing you need to try. So again, we're thinking about micro practices, a few minutes of nervous system regulation whenever food stress or distress starts coming up. Self talk reframes, shifting your idea from fullness is bad to fullness means I'm nourishing myself. And then this is like my favorite phrase, habit stacking, pairing grounding techniques and routines that are already working for you with new things you're trying, like deep breathing while washing dishes or body checking while tucking in the kids. We want to help you choose the right therapeutic tools for you. Since you're open to the idea of EMDR, that really can be a powerful next step. If your therapist offers it, or if you need something even gentler than EMDR, the DBT skills work is another good idea. DBT is going to give you immediate tools for emotion regulation without diving too deep into the trauma. EMDR does a little bit more of the digging into trauma, but I have seen it be really successful for neutralizing your association with traumatic events that have happened in your life. And all of this, Mary, goes under the umbrella of making space for your own needs, which I imagine in a family of 8 probably seems a little impossible, and I don't blame you. But beyond this food related work that you're doing, there's also going to be the question in general of how you receive care, how you receive nurturing, not just as a mom, but as a person. If you're constantly holding space for others, and it's going to be so important to find ways, even micro small ones, to nurture yourself. That is going to be so important as doing direct intervention on this. Because the goal isn't ever going to be to add more work to your healing. It's helping you feel more in control of your healing, more at ease with your body, more at ease with your mind. You don't need to take it all on at once. Whatever you choose, I want it to feel like support. I don't want it to feel like a burden. And Mary, I promise you, I promise all of you actually, I am working to wrap this up here. I know I've gone on a while. I wanted to give you good information. I wanted you to feel well taken care of. And it was so important to me to give you options. But I need you to know that I hold so much hope for you. So much. I do see a path forward here for you. Small, little, micro baby steps that you can take within the structure of your regular everyday that can get you where you want to be and where you want to go. And please, I'm holding you to this one, sister. Please do continue to partner with your therapist on this. I don't want you doing this alone. I would never wish for anyone to do this alone. You don't have to decide what's best for you right now. You can partner with your therapist. You can share my perspective. Heck, you can throw everything I just said out the window, but you can offer all of the different things we've talked about, the suggested next steps, and you guys together can see what feels the most right and the most true for you. Thank you for this conversation and for the privilege of telling your story so that other daughters in your place will feel seen and heard. And I do so hope they're feeling hopeful for themselves too. Now, for all of you listening, Mary and I connected through Mayhem Daughters, and her letter is a testament to what's possible with the support of a community and the ability to connect with me more directly. Wherever it is that's hurting you, wherever you are in your journey, whether your mom is narcissistic or emotionally limited, you have a place inside of Mayhem Daughters waiting for you. We already believe you. You already belong, and you can find a link to join in the show notes. And if you don't have the therapeutic support that Mary does, Tuesday group might very well be a better fit for you. We meet every week, and that is offering a space where you can go deeper into your experiences with my guidance and the connection of other women who are in it with you. You're going to find a link to join that in the show notes as well. All of you are in this community of women around the world who are in this with you. And I, for sure, most definitely am in it with you too. Bye for now. I do hope you enjoyed today's conversation. If you have a question you'd like me to consider for the show, please do email me over at heather@daughtersnpd.com. You are always welcome to share your story or questions by recording yourself using the voice app on your phone. For best recording quality, please do record directly into your phone without using headphones or Bluetooth speakers. We're building an incredible community as well over on Instagram, and I'd love to see you over there too. You can find us at Daughters NPD. Lastly, if you love what you've been hearing here on Mayhem and have found the show helpful in your own trauma recovery, please do consider becoming a Mother Mayhem sponsor by purchasing simple scripts for saying hard things. It's a resource I created that provides the right words for the hard conversations, and it covers life, love, and work. You'll find a link for that in the show notes. If you know another woman who needs this conversation in her life, please do share the show with her. Your reviews and social shares help spread the word, and I hope you'll consider doing so. Special thanks to Heather Clark for editing the show. She's in my head and knows what I meant to say when the words come out backwards. Thanks so much for your time today. As always, I'm in it with you. Bye for now.